Welcome back to Canard Boulevard. Back in the hangar working today. You notice no coat. It's warmer today. We did have another spate of winter weather, but it's behind us now. And hopefully it's going to be warm from here on out. Status of the airplane is pretty much unchanged. As you can see, I still do not have a prop. Today is February the 27th as I'm recording this. I just talked to Kato a few minutes ago and it still has not shipped. It's finally done and they're waiting to ship it. They're waiting for their shipping company. They said maybe next week. I'm like, so another week at least, maybe 2 weeks before I have the prop. And meanwhile, we got beautiful flyable weather and I'm sitting here with an airplane with no prop. I could put the old prop on, but one of the bolts that I have that matches that thickness of hub is stripped. So I would have to order that. So it's not really an option. I guess it would be if I was absolutely stuck. But I'm still here with no flying airplane. What I do have is a set of plug wires. These are to replace the plug wires on the electronic ignition, which uses automotive plugs. It uses a standard male tower on the coil, and then it uses a standard automotive plug on the other side. So I made these cables up. This is the box that I made it from. It came from Summit Racing, and I'll show you how to do that. It's fairly simple. And I do have the new operating limitations with the new airworthiness certificate for the airplane. That was so that I can now do the condition inspection as an LSRI holder. So now I can do my annuals on the airplane myself. So I've got to put that back into the airplane. And then I brought all my database stuff because the databases in the Avionics are months out of date. So I'm hoping that I'll update it now and be able to fly soon before they go out of date again. Let me show you how you actually build these. What I did is I bought a kit from Summit Racing that is intended for a V8 engine. I got 8mm silicone plug wires, 300 ohms per foot, which is what should work for the electronic ignition. And I'll show you how you actually put those together. What you get from Summit is these wires here. You can see, and they have a boot on one end and then the other end is stripped. You cut these to whatever length that you think you're going to need. Measure 3 times, cut once. And then they give you this bag of goodies here, which contains all the stuff that you're going to need. And it also contains this tool, which I'll show you in just a moment. And then let's have a look at the boots. And they have various different kinds of boots that you can use because they don't know what you're going to actually be making from this. So here's a sample, a terminal and a boot, not the type that I use. This type, you actually put the boot on first, then install the terminal, and then you slide the boot back off. It helps if you have some silicone spray to push these through the boots, otherwise it's pretty tough pushing silicone wire through a silicone boot. So assume we've put this boot on and it's on the wire like that. You can see I've got the wire here and it is cut at the length that I need it. So we're going to push it into this block, and you can see on the block we have different sizes. Holes, 8.5, 7, 8. This is 8mm wire, so we'll push it in there until it reaches out to the end of the block, just like so. Then we're going to take this knife, push it right against that block, right at the edge there, like that. And while pushing down on the knife or a razor blade or what have you, we're going to turn the wire, just like so. And now you can see with just a little bit of rotation, we can just pull that right off the spiral core. And now we have a strip end with the spiral core exposed. Next, we're going to bend this over, the core, and we want to make sure that when we bend it over, there's no gap in here, or else you can end up with arcing. So we want that pushed over and just bent along the back side of the wire like that. They suggest, and I suggest also, that you take the terminal and just take these little legs and just kind of bend them in a little ways. Just so you can see it's kind of bent in a little bit. Now we're going to take our cable with the spiral core at the bottom. So it's the bottom of the spiral core is going to touch the bottom of the contacts. And we're going to push it up to right about there, so that the core, you can see, is going around and then it's going to be crimped at the bottom against the terminal. Next, we take our crimper tool with the metal W in it, and we're going to push the open end of the terminal into that W, just like so. So you can see that. Make sure it's straight. Then we'll take the other end and we're going to push it in just like So all right, now we take that and we're going to insert it into the vise, close it up until the crimper is completely crimped, closed. Open it up. Then we can remove it from the crimper. The wire is now crimped onto the terminal and there's no loop in there for the spiral wound core, and it is contacting it. So the next thing you do is take your multimeter and take a measurement there to make sure that you have the correct resistance. This is about a 2-foot long piece, so it should have roughly 600, maybe 550, 600 ohms in it. Now, obviously, you would have put this boot on there. I didn't do it in this example, but you would then slide the boot up there and then use some dielectric grease to lubricate and coat the insides of your boot and terminal to prevent arcing and corrosion. And that's it. That's how you construct these wires. Obviously, the boot is going to go on first. I just didn't do it for this demonstration. I started out by removing cylinders 1 and 3, the plugs, wires from the engine. You can see I pulled them out there. And while I was doing that, I saw that the bracket holding my electric fuel pump to the firewall was loose, so I spent some time tightening that back up. Then I installed the new wires on 1 and 3, and then started pulling out the 2 and 4 cables, and then started pulling the cables for 2 and 4. This took a little more time because you have to get them routed exactly right. And here I'm dealing with a stubborn Adele clamp. So getting things hooked up and so the cables aren't moving around and aren't going to chafe takes a little bit of extra time. I did want to spend just a minute explaining why I put the electronic ignition on this airplane in the first place. Well, first off, it came with one, but the one that was on it was old and malfunctioning, and so it did need to be replaced. But I did replace it with another electronic ignition, also from Electroair, and there's a good reason why. When it comes to magnetos, they are 1930s tractor technology, and yes, they're reliable and so on to a point, but they are still mechanical, and mechanical things break, and they need to be looked at and overhauled every so often, and they do wear out. They are all also limited in that they are fixed to a specific timing, 25 degrees in my case, for my engine. The electronic ignition will retard the timing so that the spark happens earlier in the combustion cycle when the engine requires it. When you're at full power, it's running at 25 degrees just like a magneto does, but when you pull the power back like in cruise, it will adjust the timing backwards so that it fires earlier, which means the engine has more time to burn the fuel air charge and extract energy from it. That means your CHTs go up a little bit because more heat, more burning is going on for a longer time in the cylinder. But your CHTs typically are not going to be high as they would be in full power climb, because when it does reduce the timing, it's because the power is pulled back. So it's not really that much of an issue. And because you are no longer exhausting a hot burning charge, it means the charge has already expended more of its energy into moving the piston down, so it's cooler, which means when the exhaust valve opens, the charge that exits is a cooler temperature, which means there's less wear and erosion on your exhaust valves. The exhaust valves last longer. It's a good thing. In addition to that, it actually causes this mixture to ignite better. When a magneto fires, it's a very quick snap. You get a quick spark, and that's it. The breaker point's open, the field collapses, and you get a very, very brief spark, just enough to start igniting the mixture in the cylinder, and then the flame front gradually opens up and starts burning across the piston. And on my slick magneto, the spark lasts for about 3 degrees of crank rotation. As the crank moves through 3 degrees of arc, that's about how long the spark lasts, at about 10,000 volts. On the other hand, the EIS system, the Electroair system I put in there, it puts out about 78,000 volts, so almost 8 times the power. And instead of just 3 degrees, it puts it out for 20 degrees. That means there's a lot more energy going into igniting that charge and keeping it ignited and making sure that the flame front grows as fast and completely as possible. More power, less fuel. The other advantage, and this is an advantage where you might want to replace both your magnetos, is that a magneto takes a fair bit of power in order to run. It takes about 1.5 horsepower to drive a magneto. So if you have 2 magnetos, that means that's 3 horsepower you're suctioning off the top of the engine output just to drive the magnetos. The electro-air system just has a timing wheel that it drives, and that timing wheel just it has no resistance at all. It's just a wheel on a bearing with an electronic sensor that watches to see where the engine is in its cycle. So you do get a little bit extra power that way as well. The magneto has a spark gap with the distributor built in there, and it has to move a physical arm to connect the different plugs. And it relies on air inside the magneto as an insulator. As you go higher in altitude, the air gets thinner and thinner, and there is less and less insulation. So once you get up to 18,000, 20,000 feet, you're going to get internal arcing inside your magneto. And that's why they have pressurized magnetos where it's actually pushing turbocharged air into your magneto to try to prevent that arcing. In the electronic ignition, there are no moving parts. There's nowhere for an arc to occur. It is simply just solid-state electronics. Anyway, that's why I have that system on my airplane. I just thought I'd explain that because I had a couple people ask, why do I have that? Why do I have one system and one magneto? Valid question. I may actually change out that magneto and put a second electronic ignition system in there one day so I don't have to keep sending them off for an IRAN every 500 hours. All right, back to the video. So I have my new wires installed, as you can see there. And then I did the database updates. I did it on the G3X, that was fine. But then I did the 650. But then you'll notice my 650 is missing out of the panel. I turned it on, and it booted up, and it detected my iPad, and it said ready to load the databases. But the databases said it was going to load for January. I'm like, that's the problem. I canceled that and realized, oh, I got to reboot it. So I shut the power off, because there's no way to actually reboot the 650, you just power cycle it. When I turned it back on, dead, does not turn on, just completely black screen. So I messed with it and tried all kinds of different things, pulled that out, put it back in, reseated. I checked the power on the pins, make sure there was power there, and there was. I've had this happen once before, and I took it into the shop, and they plugged it in, and it worked fine. And then I put it back in the plane, and it still worked fine. So I thought, well, what could be wrong? I know that if the 650 has, and the 750, if the battery goes dead, there's an internal battery, and if it goes dead, it can keep it from turning on. So I opened up the 650, and I tested this battery right here with my meter. Garmin, if you send it in the Garmin, they charge you $975 to replace that battery. And that is it's about a $5 battery. All right, I tested the battery in the 650 and it is fine. It's actually measuring perfect. So then I measured voltage on the pins in here because there's separate voltage for the GPS and for the radio, and they're both working fine. And interestingly, the radio is actually functioning. I can transmit even though the screen was dead. So then I started going up here and measuring, and all the voltage seemed to be fine. But then I put the radio in and put an actual draw on it. And when I measured the voltage right here, which is where it was going to the 650, I was measuring 3 volts. But if I measure at the breaker, which is right here, I was measuring 12.97. And then I measured down here to the trace on the board there, and it was 12.97. And then I measure it to here, and it's 3 volts. So something is going wrong with this terminal strip here, and it is not passing through. So I have a feeling that I'm getting cracks in the traces on this board, which means it looks like I need to push forward my VPX upgrade. I've been planning to put a vertical power system in here, but I can't really do that until I replace the panel. So what I'm going to do in the meantime is I'm going to bypass this PCB trace altogether. I'm going to take this wire, I'm going to cut it off here. I'll put a connector on there and just connect it right onto the terminal strip so it feeds it directly in. That will fix the problem temporarily until I can rip this whole board out and fix it. That's better. So I have replaced that wire there. I've cut it and then just put it right onto the terminal directly. I've had this issue a couple times where when there's load, it just goes away. So I'm gonna do the same thing for all these wires that are coming in here, because I just don't trust them anymore. I don't trust the traces on the board that they aren't gonna fail in the same way. And that'll be my temporary workaround until I can replace this whole panel. All right, you can see that I have clipped all the wires that were running into the circuit board there, and have instead put ring terminals on them and connected them up directly to these terminal blocks. So the failures that I'm experiencing with which must be cracks in the traces on the PC board, will no longer cause electrical failures. All right, that was a little bit more than I had planned to do today. Did get the plug wires on, that's good. Can't obviously test that. I was going to put the bottom cowl on. I think I'm pressing my luck by putting the bottom cowl back on because that will pretty much guarantee there's something wrong with the spark plug wires, so I think I'll leave it off, do the test or initial test run at least with both cowls off. The GPS was just right out of nowhere. I'm glad I actually have found that because I've had a few things like that where you turn on a system and it would not come on right away, and the voltage was not quite right, and I didn't know if there was like a capacitor that was charging up or something, but it turns out it was just that switch panel, that breaker panel. And if you didn't understand what happened there, the GPS wasn't powering up because it didn't have enough current, and the failure in probably the PC board trace there where it just cracked open was acting as a resistor. So when I took the GPS out and I measured the voltage there was 12 volts. So I was like, okay, well, it should be working fine. What's the problem? And then I put it in and it would get nothing. So I was thinking, okay, it's the GPS because I measured voltage at the pins at where the GPS plugged in. But then when I actually plugged it in and measured the voltage up top, and I was seeing 3 volts, I'm like, okay, that's what's going on. There's a problem with the power distribution up top. It's acting as a resistor. It's limiting the current going through, so the voltage drops down. So as soon as I saw 3 volts, I should have figured it out earlier. It took me too long to figure out that problem. Based on that failure, as well as the issue where I have seen delayed turn-ons and so on, I think the safe bet was to do exactly what I just did and abandon the PC board traces altogether and just replace everything with those terminals like I wired in tonight. So that will eliminate that failure, that point of failure, either now or in the future until I can put the vertical power system in there and redo the whole panel. All right, that's it for this video. Hope you like what you saw here. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below. And hey, please subscribe to the channel. I looked at it today and 12.7% of the people that watch my videos are subscribed to the channel. I'd really like if you could just click subscribe, click notify on there. It really helps me out and helps me grow the channel and get it seen by many, many more people. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching.